When it comes to glyphs in Mr. Pandaria, they may seem a little bit lackluster, and in most cases they are, but most classes have got a glyph or two that are incredibly impactful, and quite honestly, Paladin have a lot of those. And we're going to fly through all of these so you can make some educated choices on what glyphs you're going to use for your Paladin. If you want to know more about the Paladin talents, that video's in this playlist already, and the retribution changes, as in how ret changes from kata to MoP, is also going to be out in the next couple of days, which will be in this playlist. But we are going to fly through these. So firstly, we've got Battle Healer, which is a holy glyph because it makes melee attacks from Seal of Insight heal the most wounded member of your raid or party for 30% of the normal heal instead of you. So if you're not aware of how Seal of Insight changes, what this actually does is fills you with Holy Light, increasing your casting speed by 10%, improving your healing spells by 5%, and giving melee attacks a chance to heal you for 3.8k in my current gear. So now it will just be passive healing to other people where it's actually more useful. Double Jeopardy is definitely more of a ret or protection talent, but judging a target increases the damage of your next judgment by 20%, but only if it's used on a different second target. So this is particularly strong, of course, on ad fights or target switching, but really, this is not a glyph you're going to worry about as holy. Glyph of Flash of Light, however, would be, because when you Flash of Light a target, it increases your next heal done to that target within 7 seconds by 10%. Now that's quite good because Flash of Light is a quick, quite expensive heal, so you would use that to just stop them from dying before you went into, say, a more slower, big heal like Divine Light. And then that Divine Light's going to do 10% more when it already does a crap ton anyway. Inquisition is specifically for retribution, and when you land a killing blow on an opponent that yields experience or honor, the duration of your Inquisition is increased by 30 seconds. Again, really good for target switching, but immense for when you're out leveling a ret paladin using this. Mass Exorcism is probably the best ret paladin can get though, because Exorcism's range is reduced to melee range, but 20% of the damage is caused to all enemies within 8 yards of the primary target. This, honestly, for ret paladins is basically mandatory. You're not going to see any rets running around without this because, in general, ret paladin just does so much AoE. It's actually really, really fun. Glyph of the Alabaster Shield is for protection, and your successful blocks increase the damage of your next Shielded or Righteous by 10%. This stacks 3 times, and basically, in terms of threat, damage, you know, all that good stuff, again, probably one of the mandatory ones for protection. Avenging Wrath can be used by all specs of Paladin, and while Avenging Wrath is active, you're healed for 1% of your max health every 2 seconds. Just adds a bit of passive healing when you're using Avenging Wrath, nothing too exciting there. Glyph of Beacon of Light removes the global cooldown on Beacon of Light. Now, you're probably used to the Beacon of Light glyph from Cataclysm, where it makes it free to cast. Well, it's free to cast in Mr. Pandaria anyway, without a glyph or without a talent or anything like that, so having Beacon of Light with no global cooldown just means it's not really going to feel as punishing when you're switching it from one target to another. Blessed Life gives you a 50% chance to gain a charge of Holy Power whenever you are affected by a stun, fear, or immobilize effect. This can only occur once every 20 seconds, and currently is a talent in Cataclysm. It's now become a glyph, and basically makes this glyph useful for any spec of Paladin if you're PvPing. And of course, in certain niche fights, you might also use it, but mainly a PvP glyph. Glyph of Blinding Light makes your Blinding Light now knock down targets for 3 seconds instead of blinding them. I'll go into all of the new abilities because this is a new one for Mr. Pandaria, and I'll definitely be talking about them in the individual spec changes, but this is basically just an AoE blind currently on a 2-minute cooldown. Burden of Guilt causes your judgment hits to fill the target with dread and remorse, reducing movement speed by 50% for 2 seconds. Again, pretty useful for PvP. Consecration is a massive one for protection paladins, so you can now target Consecrate anywhere within 25 yards. So it's become kind of a protection paladin's Death and Decay, which is probably a bit too late. Would have been nice to have that in Cataclysm. Glyph of Dazing Shield causes your Avenger's Shield now to also daze targets for 10 seconds, so nothing too interesting there. Glyph of Denounce causes your Holy Shocks to reduce the cast time of your next Denounce by half a second, and this stacks 3 times. This will then make Denounce instant cast, because Denounce is a 1.5 second cast. It's super strong in PvP because it stops the person that you've denounced from being able to do critical strikes. OP much? Glyph of Devotion Aura turns your raid cooldown, which is Devotion Aura, from a raid cooldown to a personal cooldown, but makes it a 2-minute cooldown instead of 3. There's not many occasions where you're going to want to lose your one and only raid cooldown. Divine Plea returns 50% less mana, but has a 50% shorter cooldown, so this is specifically for Holy, because Divine Plea has a 2-minute cooldown and gives you mana equal to 135% of your spirit, excluding any trinket procs or anything like that that would increase your spirit, and the total mana gained will never be less than 12% of the caster's mana. So basically, using the glyph, you can use it twice as often, but still you'll get the same amount amount of mana as if you didn't have the glyph. So Divine Protection by default gives 40% magic reduction on a 1 minute cooldown in MoP. If you want it to do 20% physical and 20% damage, then you can glyph it. Divine Shield changes Divine Shield, so removing harmful effects with Divine Shield heals you for 10% for each effect removed. This heal cannot exceed 50% of your maximum health. So in PvP or something like that, and you're bubbling off loads of Warlock dots, you can more or less just keep pumping because you won't need to bubble and heal yourself. You're going to bubble, which is naturally going to heal you, and just carry on nuking. Divine Storm, quite boring, just causes your Divine Storm to also heal you for 5% max health. Divinity increases the cooldown of your Lay on Hands by 2 minutes, but causes it to give you 10% of your max mana. Now, Lay on Hands is still a big cooldown, being 10 minutes, so putting it up to 12 minutes, you're still only going to get to use it once a fight, but you're now going to get 10% mana back when you do. Pretty strong. Final Wrath for protection makes your Holy Wrath do an additional 50% damage to targets with less than 20% health. Focus Shield you'll already be familiar with if you're a protection paladin, because it just means it's going to be single target but do 30% more damage. Glyph of Hammer of the Righteous makes the physical damage reduction caused by Hammer of the Righteous now last 50% longer. Not really a big deal because you're going to be using that very frequently anyway. Glyph of Hand of Sacrifice is a particularly strong one because when you use this on someone, it no longer redirects the damage to you, so you can essentially just use it as a 30% damage reduction cooldown with no risk and not needing to do the famous bubble sack. Harsh Words makes your Word of Glory now be used on enemies, causing holy damage approximately equal to the amount it would have healed. Now, it doesn't work with Eternal Flame, and if you don't know what Eternal Flame is, it's a talent where it turns your Word of Glory into an instant heal with a hot portion over 30 seconds. Now, it seems nice on paper, but rarely something you're going to use. Glyph of Holy Shock would be if you're wanting to put more damage out as a Holy Paladin for some reason, because it decreases the healing of Holy Shock by 50%, but increases its damage by 50%. Rise of the Scottejaye. You only get Holy Wrath as protection now, so this Glyph of Holy Wrath is a protection-only glyph, but it does the same thing as what it does in Kata, where it causes your Holy Wrath to also stun elementals, dragonkin, and aberrations. Glyph of Illumination causes your Holy Shock crits to grant 1% mana return, but Holy Insight returns 10% less mana. Holy Insight is basically the passive you get when you select Holy that makes you a healer, because this is where it increases your mana pool by 400%. And it also allows 50% of your mana regen from Spirit to continue while casting. So you're trading off some of that to get more mana from Holy Shock. It's kind of down to you. Glyph of Immediate Truth increases the instant damage done by Seal of Truth by 40%, but decreases the damage done by Censor by 50%. So Seal of Truth still works the same way, where it's going to do instant damage, but then also applies a dot that stacks 5 times. So you're trading off some of that dot damage for the instant damage. In my opinion, not something you're ever going to use. Light of Dawn is for Holy and not an unfamiliar glyph, because it's going to lower the amount of targets that can get hit by Light of Dawn by 2, but increase the amount it heals by 25%. Glyph of Protector of the Innocent, it's a mouthful. When you use Word of Glory to heal another target, it also heals you for 20% of the amount, so this can be pretty nice for Holy. Templar's Verdict causes you to take 10% less damage for 6 seconds after dealing damage with Templar's Verdict or Exorcism. Now, that don't sound great, but taking 10% damage, I want to say almost all the time, because within 6-second periods, you're most of the time going to be using a Templar's Verdict or an Exorcism. It's actually going to be quite nice. And then the final major glyph is Word of Glory. This just increases your damage by 3% per holy power spent after you cast Word of Glory or Eternal Flame on a friendly target, and this lasts 6 seconds. Now, if you was using Glyph of Harsh Words, which actually allows you to do range damage still as a Ret Paladin, because Word of Glory has got a range, and you'd be casting it on an enemy, if you was using this glyph as well, that would actually activate it. If you was combining those two, it could be useful, but outside of that, I don't really see a Ret Paladin wanting to waste 3 holy power when they could press Templar's Verdict or Divine Storm. Now, the minor glyphs are not really important. Of course, there's no prime glyphs anymore. It is only major and minor, and these are all going to be pretty just aesthetic based. So I'm only going to talk about the ones that are not aesthetic, like Falling Avenger. So if you've got Avenging Wrath on, you actually gain a slow fall, which that can be pretty cool at times. Focus Wrath for Protection Paladins causes Holy Wrath to only affect one target, which could be particularly useful if you're on a fight and there's a portion of the fight where you can't cleave any adds, or you want to still be using Holy Wrath because it's doing more damage because you've got it glyphed where it's doing 50% more because the boss that you're targeting is under 20%, but you don't want to touch anything else. So again, there'll be use cases for it. My favourite one is Righteous Retreat. So during Divine Shield, you can invoke your Hearthstone 50% faster. Bubble Half just got even better. And then really the only one that actually does anything of use is Glyph of the Mounted King, where mounting one of your Paladin class mounts automatically casts Blessing of Kings on you. Which, if you was to use that while you're leveling, that's pretty useful, and you was to actually be riding around, let's say you're leveling in Mr. Pandaria, where you can't fly, but you was actually to keep using your Paladin class mount instead of another mount, you've never got to worry about buffing yourself, which I actually think that's quite cool. But that is all the Paladin glyphs. Let me know what ones you think sound good. I know glyphs seem a little bit weird in MoP compared to what you're used to in Cataclysm, but I think there's some little hidden gems in there that are actually going to be quite useful, and swapping your glyphs, swapping your talents almost on a fight-by-fight basis is just going to make raiding feel really, really fresh in Mr. Pandaria. If you haven't seen the talent video, be sure to check that out. And as I say, in the next couple of days, maybe even later on today, you're going to see the Retribution Changes video. I'm going to try and fill out this Paladin playlist first and then move on to Druid. So if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.